Hello everyone, this is Infinum here. Today we're going to talk about the Galactic Legends after the post-nerf the counters. So, as you know, there has been some balance changes that they have announced on the road ahead that imply the changes of some characters like Vader, General Skywalker, Jedi Knight Luke. Do read the road ahead in case you have missed that, because they're very significant changes, and I'll be covering these assuming that you already know what these are, or at least you have a little bit of an idea of what happened. But just basically, they're going to touch characters in a way that makes Galactic Legends feel more like raid bosses. So the difference between a Galactic Legend and a non-Galactic Legend has now been enhanced. However, there's a lot of fears about counters that no longer work, so we're going to look into our current counters to Galactic Legends, and we're going to assess which non-GL counters seem to be viable, and which GLs we really seemed like we have to trade GLs, which other GLs we can take risks and try to use still some counters to some degree of success. So let's start this by going against Rey. So some of the most common Rey counters include Darth Vader and Bastila lead JKL General Skywalker. So the Bastila lead General Skywalker one really relies on General Skywalker's max health reduction on Galactic Legend Rey. That no longer happens. I fear that this counter will completely die, as well as Vader. Vader will no longer do as much damage with Cullen Blade, and weapon tech will no longer allow you to ignore defense. So I think that both the Vader counters and the Jedi counters will no longer work, which leaves me to conclude that we no longer have GL counters, non-GL counters to Rey. So what? No longer ignoring defense, Thrawn not being able to fracture. Well, Thrawn being able to fracture, but not allowing Rey to still take turns and use her ultimate is huge. Vader not being able to deal as much damage on the Cullen Blade means that you're not killing Rey. General Skywalker not reducing health, and Jedi's will not allowing for a true damage dealing on that buff means that very likely these counters die off. That's what I'm expecting. Maybe some new ones surge. For example, I know people are working on Geonosians against Rey. It can work against certain comps, but it can also be very difficult to execute. But maybe one worth looking. Certainly possible, but the most common counters have been ridicularized, no longer doable. So let's proceed over to another Galactic Legend. Here we have Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. I decided to specify this into Jedi Knight Luke and other counters, so let's go into Jedi Knight Luke first. Jedi Knight Luke does have a very favorable matchup against these Supreme Leader Kylo Ren comps, purely out of Jedi's will, ignoring defense, and just shredding the crap out of these characters. He just one-taps a lot, and it's a very successful counter. This data is all from this season. It actually happens to be the data I collected for all of these sample sizes here, and I think that the Jedi Knight Luke counter will no longer work as well, because Jedi's will interacts in a different way than the current one. Maybe there's still some work here that can be done. He does do more damage now against tanks, so we'll see if that works favorably for Jedi Knight Luke, because it's not just strictly a nerf, but ignoring defense was kind of huge, and now he no longer does such things. So we shall see how that goes with Jedi's will. I don't think it's too favorable. Like, if I were to account for playtesting from CG and possibly, you know, seeing if it balances out in a way that they'd like, I'd imagine that this counter dies. However, they didn't touch anything in the Rex Zeres battles. We can see that 30% win rate, but it really relies on specific modding. I think this counter is still alive. And in regards to the Vader one, you know, like we mentioned with Rey, Vader getting nerfed, Wat Tambor getting nerfed, Thrawn getting nerfed, allowing SLKR to take turns is not ideal. So when we look over to this, I think Jedi Knight Luke does have a little bit of a change there. Not sure how that's really gonna interact with this counter. Maybe he's still as strong. I would imagine not so much. Thrawn, the fracture not holding back on turns on Galactic Legends and being only a minus 50% speed reduction really cuts the counters from both Vader and Darth Revan, because sometimes you could also plug him into Darth Revan teams and being able to do some damage against Kylo Ren. I think CLS still has a word to say if you're fighting an SLKR Night Sister team. So if they have Daka Zombie the combination, then Chupio can really pop off with that AoE. Rex Zerus seems like winners, and the Padme Cat team, that's one counter that we just did as one of our previous videos. It was decent. I still don't know how it goes reliability wise, but maybe one to explore in the future due to possibly lack of options. So that moves us over. Jedi Master Kenobi General Counters. Here I didn't put Padme, I should have, but Padme Cat should work fine. Bad Batch seems to be working pretty well too if you have all of these guys at relic levels. 3 of these guys are now required for Lord Vader, so you should be working on this team at some point. So that's something decent. Unfortunately, this data was only against a GMK Bad Batch as well. And General Skywalker, as long as you're facing a non-cat variant, I think he still has a pretty prominent word in regards to what he can do against Jedi Master Kenobi, because your win condition isn't really cooldown increasing. I mean, there's some good things in there, but don't forget that General Skywalker is also buffed. Now he takes 5 turns to get up instead of 10 turns, so your clones are exposed for a lot less time. I do think General Skywalker does have a very strong word to say. So if we look into these teams, so Hunter probably with his Bad Batch is still going to do fine. General Skywalker, I believe, is still going to do fine as long as they don't have Commander Ahsoka Tano. And Padme with Commander Ahsoka Tano will also do fine. All of these counters work against non-cat variants. Not sure about Cam. Cam can be a little bit different. I know the Padme Cat one against Cam is fine. They also said that they're looking into the interactions between Ahsoka Tano and non-JMK teams, so there is some potential for a Padme Cat nerf, so she might work not as well with this team. We shall see how that operates, that's for sure. Here, we proceed over to Jedi Master Luke. I decided to employ Commander Luke Skywalker into these because it's a team that it can actually be quite tricky if you're using not as good kind of Jedi. If you're not spending your Jedi Knight Luke with JML and you're trying to split them into 2 different teams, which you might no longer want to do anymore. We'll see. CLS could be a reasonable team to use, really depends on who you have there. If you're fighting a Bastila elite team and they don't have that much DPS, and we have Bastila, Tank Tech, JML, and 2 other stalling Jedi, like, I don't know, Jolie and Zerus, should be fine. Speaking of Bastila leads, I'd imagine General Skywalker against a similar team would also do fine, because it just relies on getting so many buffs from the enemy team that he stacks up all of that damage. General Grievous, one of his hits does reduce max self damage on a Galactic Legend. Now they're treated like raid bosses, so that no longer happens. They still TM roll pretty well against the Jedi Master Luke lead, but very likely that it doesn't work as well. So if we were to consider these counters, I believe General Skywalker is going to be one of the most effective teams out there. It really depends on what kind of Jedi Master Luke combination we're looking here. Really depends on this lead as well, but I'd imagine General Skywalker is going to do fine. I think Commander Luke Skywalker is also going to do pretty well. General Grievous, I mean, it's not a common counter. You don't really use General Grievous against GML lead, but if you did use this team, I think it's kind of nullified at this point. But it was a counter I was trying to exploit to see if I couldn't work a little bit more on this one. Didn't really have time because it might die off. Moving on, Sith Eternal Emperor, last but not least, right? And you have Imperial Troopers. Now, as you know, Sith Eternal Emperor got a very small buff that says that they gain 5% turn meter per undispellable buff, aka Emperor's Trap. Piet gives out a lot of that. Whenever they're taking turns and whenever they're doing damage, they gain 1 stack of Emperor's Trap, so they continuously gain a buff. So Sith Eternal Emperor and the rest of his team is going to gain a lot of turn meter via the buffs that the Imperial Troopers are gaining. It's very likely going to stop that counter. And if you have a Relic 8 Dark Trooper, Relic 7, anything above Relic 5, you're going to be refunded, and your Dark Trooper is going to be taken back to Relic 5 as well. So don't worry about that too much if you worked on Dark Trooper purely for Sith Eternal. But I would believe that this counter is not going to work anymore. Thrawn, Vader, what? We've talked about these guys. Fracture no longer is going to hold Sith Eternal. Vader's damage is going to collapse. Wat Tambor giving out weapon tech. no longer ignores defense, so Vader's damage also collapses even further. So I'd imagine that these Vader counters we're looking into here are also not going to be too helpful. Gideon also has this demoralized that he no longer can apply to Galactic Legends, so demoralize is also just not gonna happen, so there's also that. And as a conclusion, I'd imagine Imperial Troopers and Vader, the two staple counters at the moment, are no longer going to work. So Sith Eternal is a little bit like Rey. There's no really big counters that are used here. So we'll see. We'll see what brings us with the new changes and which characters might bring us some idea of what we can do against Sith Eternal. So in my conclusion, we have Galactic Legends. They're supposed to be their new tier. Well, they were already above other characters, right? But now they're supposed to be really strong. If you have a Galactic Legend, it's like having your do-it-yourself raid boss, your raid boss at home. Mom, I went to raid boss at home. Galactic Legends. That's what they're supposed to be. And then you have every other team in the game. Now, of course, not every other team in the game is as valuable as the other teams in the game, but Galactic Legends are definitely a step above from the other teams, and I think that's really what I want to emphasize here. I think there's some hope for non-GL counters to Galactic Legends. Those really depend on which compositions they're using, but overall, Galactic Legends got really buffed, and we'll have to see how some of these changes do work out. This is what I believe to be the counters that would actually work a little bit based on the data that is provided to us by Swaga.gg. I think it's an amazing website. If you haven't seen it yet, it's very helpful to see win rates. Huge, very huge. So thank you guys so much for watching. I think this is the opinion on balance on what's gonna happen to the game post GLs, and yeah, I mean, leave it in the comments down below if you guys think that these are some good ideas, if we treated this information correctly. And I'm always open to new suggestions. We'll probably have some new counters. We might have some more balance changes, because I remember that they said, the developers have said that they're looking into the feedback from the community as well. So maybe some of the changes are not going to be as extreme. Maybe some changes will actually implement some other characters that we say here that say, oh, Padme Cat works against JMK, and maybe they're looking into Cat and going to nerf her, which she already has some arena stability that makes the team pretty good. Shall see. Have to wait and see. So thank you guys so much for watching, and see you all soon. See you in the next video.